Ford Whitaker stepped onto the sand as if it were a boardroom floor. Confident, controlled, disconnected. His shoes were Italian leather, clearly not made for beaches. His tailored blazer, dark and pristine, resisted the salt-kissed wind that tousled his neatly groomed hair. A driver rushed to greet him, but Ford's attention was already elsewhere. His gaze flicked toward the shoreline, where a white floral arch stood framed by palm fronds and folding chairs. A wedding. Of course. Ford exhaled, unamused. He hadn't come here for celebrations. His assistant, or rather, his newly promoted chief of operations, Leandro Kim, had booked this beachfront resort as a quiet, exclusive spot for Ford to finalize the last phase of the Eastbridge merger. A billion-dollar tech acquisition was due in 72 hours. Ford was here for spreadsheets and silence, not satin dresses and seashell confetti. Still, something about the scene tugged at him, not the romance of it. He didn't believe in that, but the normalcy, the laughter of distant guests, the fluttering linens, the barefoot bride half twirling in the sand. Ford blinked. Wait. His pulse stalled, then sped. The woman under the arch, that dress, that face, number. It couldn't be. Emery. For a moment the air thickened, the present blurred with memory. 7 years vanished in a blink. Ford took a slow step forward, half convinced it was exhaustion playing tricks on him. Another step. Closer now. It was her. Emery James. The only woman who ever made his perfectly engineered world feel human. His feet moved before his mind caught up. Past the event coordinator adjusting ribbons, past a small boy giggling beside a ring of seashells, then another boy, nearly identical, same age, both barefoot, sandy, laughing. Twins? Ford stepped onto the wooden aisle. Chairs turned. Someone whispered. The music dimmed. Emery turned. Time fractured. Her face paled. Her hands instinctively reached for the small boys who clung to the edges of her dress, confused but sensing her change in breath. She didn't speak, just stared. Then stiffened. Ford opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He was at the wrong wedding, but his world was suddenly in the right chaos. Ford! Her voice was barely a whisper, but it cracked like thunder in his chest. He nodded slowly, the edges of his world dissolving as he took in the 2 small boys at her side. The freckles, the wide green eyes, familiar, too familiar. A wedding guest coughed awkwardly. The officiant shuffled papers. The groom, someone Ford didn't recognize, stepped forward with a protective edge, placing a subtle arm in front of Emery and the kids. Ford backed up 1 step, then another. His mind spun. Apologies, he said, voice low, rough. I made a mistake. Emery didn't move, didn't breathe. Her eyes didn't blink. Ford turned and walked away, each step heavier than the last. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thoughts matter to me either way. Behind him, the wedding resumed, but the music didn't sound the same. The laughter no longer reached him. At the edge of the resort, Leandro stood near a waiting SUV, phone pressed to his ear. When he saw Ford's face, he hung up immediately. "What happened?" he asked, tone shifting from business to concern. Ford didn't answer. Instead, he looked out over the dunes, the sea beyond them, the arch swaying in the breeze. "Get me everything you can on her," he said finally. "Emery James. I need to know why she's here, and who those boys are." Leandro hesitated. "Ford, is that really what you want to do? This place was supposed to be—" Ford's glare cut him off, but inside he wasn't angry. He was unraveling. 7 years ago, he left without a word. One moment they were talking about furniture for their new apartment in Midtown. The next, he was on a red-eye to Zurich. He'd convinced himself it was necessary. strategic, cold detachment had built his empire. But Emery had never been part of the plan. She had been part of the pause between plans, a soft breath in the chaos, and then gone. He had told himself she would understand, that when he came back he'd explain, that love didn't need explanations, just timing, but he never came back. And now, 2 boys, green eyes, his breath caught. Could they be? Leandro, he said more quietly now. I want the truth, not a file. Leandro nodded, slower this time. I'll start with the guest registry. Ford nodded once, then turned toward the suite prepared for him. The one with the ocean view he wouldn't enjoy, the champagne he wouldn't open. Inside, he loosened his tie, poured a glass of water, sat at the edge of the bed. Then he stared at the door and whispered to no one. What did I just walk into? Outside, the wedding music picked up again. But something had changed. In Emery. In Ford. In whatever came next. The wedding ended before sunset, but Emery stayed long after the chairs were stacked, long after the champagne stopped fizzing and the sparklers faded from the sky. She stood alone by the edge of the water, barefoot, her dress damp from salt water and her mind louder than the waves. Ledger and Kyson chased crabs nearby, their laughter bouncing like echoes across the empty beach. Rachel, her younger sister, watched from the event tent, giving Emery space but keeping an eye out, not for the boys but for the man who had shaken the earth beneath her sister's feet just hours ago. Emery's fingers gripped the necklace she hadn't taken off in 7 years. A simple pendant, nothing flashy. Ford had given it to her in Atlanta, right before he left, right before he stopped answering. You okay? Rachel's voice was soft as she approached, wrapping a blanket around Emery's shoulders. Emery didn't look at her. Do you believe in ghosts, Rach? Rachel scoffed. I believe in rich men disappearing when things get too real. That's not a ghost. That's a pattern. Emery's smile didn't reach her eyes. He didn't even know it was my wedding. He just walked in and looked like he saw his past come alive. I wanted to scream, Emery said, voice low, like it hurt to say. I wanted to say, you left me on a Thursday. You looked me in the eyes and said you'd call and then you vanished. But I couldn't, because the boys were right there. Rachel followed her gaze. The twins were drawing shapes in the sand now, humming to themselves. You think he recognized them? Rachel asked. Emery's chest tightened. How could he not? They look exactly like him when he was little. Rachel hesitated. Are you going to tell them? Emery's hand trembled as she pulled the blanket tighter. Number not yet. They don't need to know who he is. Not until I know why he's here. What he wants. Before Rachel could respond, a familiar voice broke the silence. I didn't mean to crash anything. Emery turned slowly. Ford stood a few feet away. No blazer now. His shirt sleeves rolled up, hair mussed by the ocean breeze. But the eyes, they were the same. Sharp, restless, wounded. Rachel instinctively stepped forward, blocking half of Emery's view. This isn't a good time. Ford nodded once. I'll be quick. Emery met his gaze. The last time you said that, you left the country. He flinched, just barely. But she saw it. I need to talk to you, he said quietly. Not here, just somewhere private. Rachel scoffed. You think she owes you a conversation? No, Ford said. I know she doesn't, but I owe her one. Emery exhaled slowly, eyes never leaving him. 5 minutes, that's all. They walked up the beach together, the sky now streaked in lavender and gold. Ford didn't speak right away. Neither did she. Finally, they stopped beside a driftwood bench near the dunes. Ford looked down at his shoes, now full of sand. I didn't know you were here. Emery didn't move. You think I planned this? Number. I think the universe has a twisted sense of timing. She folded her arms. Timing. You've always been good at that. I deserved that. You deserve more than that, Ford. You deserve the silence you gave me, the confusion, the nights I sat by my phone thinking maybe I misread everything between us. Ford's voice cracked. I thought I could come back, that I'd explain everything after the Zurich deal closed. But then time passed, and I told myself, maybe you were better off. Better off? Emery's voice sharpened. You mean alone? Pregnant? Teaching middle school by day and throwing up from stress at night? He looked at her, pain blooming behind his eyes. I didn't know. Because you never checked. The silence between them swelled. In the distance, the boys' laughter faded as they wandered back toward the cottage with Rachel. They're mine, Ford said softly. It wasn't a question. Emery didn't answer, just stared out at the tide, rising slowly, inch by inch. He turned toward her. Ledger and Kyson. She blinked at the sound of their names from his lips. You remember everything when it finally matters, don't you? Ford sat down on the bench, his hands clasped. I missed their whole lives. You chose to. His throat tightened. Is there any part of you that believes I didn't mean to disappear? Emery shook her head slowly. Even if I did, the silence is what I remember most. Not your promises, not your goodbyes, just the silence. Ford leaned back, breath unsteady. I don't expect forgiveness, I need to understand what happens now. Emery turned to him. What happens now is that you leave them alone. You don't drop back into their world just because your guilt is heavy. They're not a burden you're here to unload. They're my boys. My life. And they're mine too, he said, not loudly, but firmly. Emery's eyes flared. Number, they're not yours just because biology says so. They're yours when you earn it. When you sit through ear infections and nightmares and school projects and scraped knees. Ford nodded. Then let me start. She studied him for a long time. The man who once disappeared like fog, now sitting still for the first time. I don't trust you, she said. I know. I don't know if I ever will. I know. But they've never asked about their father, not once, until tonight. His head lifted. Emery blinked back emotion. Ledger asked me, why don't I have a dad like the other kids? Ford swallowed hard. What did you say? He whispered. I said, some daddies leave, but some never show up to begin with. Ford closed his eyes. A breeze lifted her hair. I'm not asking for anything, he said. Not tonight, but I'll be here, however long it takes. She didn't respond. He stood slowly, brushing sand from his sleeves. I'll be in Suite 4B at the end of the boardwalk. He took one step away, then paused. Emery? He turned back. You left me on a Thursday too, I remember. She stood frozen. Then he walked away, and the sound of the waves returned. Rain arrived overnight, soft and steady, tapping gently against the window panes of the beachfront cottage Emery had rented for the boys. It was the kind of rain that made the world quieter, slower, like everything had taken a breath and held it. Emery sat at the kitchen table in her robe, a steaming mug of chamomile in front of her, untouched. The boys were still asleep, curled like commas beneath their shark print blankets. She should have felt peace, but there was only the hum of questions too loud to silence. Across the table, Rachel shuffled through leftover name cards from the wedding, her lips pressed tight. Are you going to tell them? She asked without looking up. Emery didn't answer right away. I don't know. Rachel finally met her gaze. They're smart, Em. They'll figure it out. Ledger already asked once. You don't think he'll ask again? Emery's jaw tightened. They're happy, Rach. They have a routine, stability. They have laughter and bedtime stories and birthday cakes. I built all that with my own hands. I don't want him—" She paused, her throat catching, just walking in and rearranging it. Rachel folded the name cards carefully and set them aside. What if he's not trying to rearrange it? What if he's trying to be part of it? Emery laughed quietly, but there was no humor in it. He had 7 years. 7, not one call, not a letter, nothing. "I know," Rachel said softly, "but I also saw his face yesterday, Emery. I saw the way he looked at those boys." Emery looked away, out the rain-slick window where the gray sky hung low over the ocean. "He looked like a man who'd lost something he didn't even know he had," Rachel added. The front door creaked open. Kyson padded into the kitchen in mismatched socks, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Morning, Mommy." Emery knelt and kissed the top of his head. "Morning, baby." "Ledger's still sleeping," he mumbled, grabbing a juice pouch from the fridge. "Are we going to the bookstore today?" She smiled. "Maybe later, after the rain stops." He sipped quietly, then looked up. "Are we going to see that man again?" The question froze her. Rachel stood and gently tapped Kyson's nose. "Why don't you go pick out your favorite storybook for Mommy to read after breakfast?" He nodded and ran back down the hall. Emery sank into her chair again, her shoulders slumping. "He's already in their heads. You can't undo that, Em. You can only decide how they'll remember it." Emery pressed her fingertips to her temples. Later that afternoon, the rain finally broke. The skies cleared into that soft gold only found after a storm. Emery tucked Ledger and Kyson into their rain boots, promised them a treat from the cafe after a walk, and stepped outside just as Ford was walking down the boardwalk with a coffee in one hand and a folder tucked under his arm. They stopped when they saw each other. The boys didn't notice. They ran ahead toward the beach, shrieking as they chased the wet sand crabs that had emerged after the rain. "Hey," Ford said, hesitant. Emery gave a polite nod. "Hey." He took a step closer. "Can we talk?" She looked over her shoulder at the boys, now racing toward a driftwood log. "Make it quick." Ford handed her the folder. "What's this?" "I asked Leandro to find a pediatrician on the island, and a school in case you ever—" He stopped himself. "I'm not trying to control anything, I just thought, if you needed options." Emery opened the folder briefly. Inside were notes, contacts, even photos of a nearby library. "I'm not staying," she said flatly. "I know," he replied, "but I want you to know. If you ever did want to, I'm not going anywhere this time." She closed the folder slowly. "Why now, Ford? Why show up now with folders and ideas and plans you never asked if I needed?" He paused, then said quietly, "Because yesterday I saw 2 kids who looked like the best parts of you, and the parts of me I thought I buried in ambition." Emery's breath hitched. He continued, "You asked what happens next. I don't know. But I do know this. I'm not walking away again." Kyson's voice called out from the shoreline. "Mommy, look, we found a crab family." Emery smiled faintly and waved. Her eyes, however, didn't leave Ford. "You don't get to just decide you're part of this," she said. "Being a father isn't a choice you make once. It's a decision you prove every single day." "I know that now," he said. The silence between them stretched. Then Ford added more softly, "Do you remember the last thing you said to me before I left?" She blinked. "I asked if you'd call me when you landed." He nodded. And I said, "Of course." His voice broke a little. "And then I didn't." Emery folded her arms. "I stayed up 3 nights thinking maybe your plane had crashed, that you lost your phone, that there was some emergency. But no. You just chose—" Silence. Ford stepped back, as if giving her space was the only thing he could still offer. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said, "but I hope one day they will." He turned to walk away. But then, Ford. He stopped. She walked forward slowly, glancing toward the boys, then back to him. "You said you don't expect forgiveness. That's smart," she said, voice trembling, "because it might never come. But if you're serious about not running, you'd better be ready for questions. From them, from me, and most of all, from yourself." "I am," he said without hesitation. Emery studied him. Then, after a long pause, she said, "We're going to the Dockside Diner tomorrow. The boys love the pancakes. If you show up at 9 a.m., don't be late. Don't make me explain why you didn't." Ford's eyes softened. "I'll be there." She nodded once, then turned away, but not before he saw it. Her hand resting briefly on the folder he gave her, fingers lingering just a little longer than necessary. The sun was already high when Emery walked into Dockside Diner, holding Ledger and Kyson by the hand. The smell of syrup and sizzling bacon curled through the air, mingling with the sounds of laughter, coffee cups clinking, and soft classic rock playing low in the background. Locals filled the booths, chatting like family, familiar, comfortable, safe. Exactly why she brought the boys here. But today didn't feel routine. She was early, and she hated that about herself. How she still made space for him, even without meaning to. She found a corner booth, the one near the window with the view of the marina. Kyson immediately took the spot by the glass, pressing his nose against the pane. "Look, Mommy, the shrimp boat's back." Emery smiled. "It is, baby." Ledger was quieter. He slid in beside his brother, already flipping through the kids' menu as if it was a novel. She could see his mind turning. He always watched people first, then decided how he felt. He got that from her. The door opened. Her chest tightened. Ford walked in. No blazer today, just a light blue button-down and dark jeans. His hair was windswept, but not in the way that looked styled. His gaze scanned the diner and found her instantly. He hesitated for the briefest second, then came toward them. "Hey," he said with a cautious smile. Kyson looked up. "It's the man from the beach." Ford crouched slightly to meet his eyes. "Hi there, you must be Kyson." Kyson blinked. "How do you know my name?" Ford glanced at Emery. She stayed calm, even as her heart started to race. "We've met before." Ledger watched him carefully, like a scientist observing an experiment. "Are you Mommy's friend?" That word landed like a dart. Ford smiled. "I hope so." The silence that followed made the syrup bottles on the table seem too loud. Then Emery cleared her throat. "Let's order. Kyson, pancakes or waffles?" "Pancakes," he grinned, "with whipped cream." "Me too," Ledger added, still watching Ford with quiet curiosity. A waitress approached with a bright smile, dropping off crayons and menus. Her eyes lingered on Ford just a moment too long. "Y'all need a minute?" "We're ready," Emery said quickly. She placed their order, then leaned back in the booth, her fingers brushing against the rim of her coffee cup. Ford watched the boys color their menus, each absorbed in creating a wild, syrup-laden breakfast fantasy. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Emery said, not looking at him. "I wasn't sure I'd be allowed to stay." She turned her gaze to him. "You still might not." Ford's jaw flexed, but he didn't argue. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, wrinkled photo. He slid it across the table. Emery hesitated, then picked it up. It was an old picture, a candid of her in the kitchen of their midtown apartment 7 years ago, her hair piled messily on her head, laughing with a wooden spoon in hand. "I kept that in my wallet," Ford said quietly, "even when I didn't deserve to." Emery's voice was tight. "Then why didn't you use it to remind yourself to come home?" He looked down. Because I thought I had to earn the right to come back, and the longer I waited, the more I convinced myself you were better off without me." Ledger looked up then, his fork clinking against his plate. "Are you sad?" Ford blinked. "What?" "You look like my goldfish did when Kyson dropped the tank last year." Kyson looked horrified. "He didn't mean to." Ford let out a laugh, small, unexpected, but real. "That's an oddly perfect comparison." The boys giggled. Emery watched, stunned for a second by the ease of it, the way Ford didn't force anything, the way the boys responded. But she'd learned long ago that moments could lie, that even the warmest smiles could hide exits. The waitress returned with their food. Plates landed, syrup poured, napkins tucked into collars. For a few minutes it almost felt like a normal breakfast. Almost. Until Ledger, always the observer, put down his fork and said, "You know a lot about us." Ford froze, mid-cut into his pancake. Emery's pulse jumped. Ledger continued, eyes sharp. "But we don't know anything about you." Ford set his fork down. "What do you want to know?" Kyson leaned in, whispering loudly, "Are you a superhero?" Ford smiled. "Not quite. I build things. Big things. Computers. Networks." "Boring," Kyson declared, and went back to his pancakes. Ledger, though, kept watching. "Do you know our dad?" Emery's fingers tightened around her coffee cup. Ford didn't look away. "I'm trying to." Emery inhaled slowly, steadying herself. Later, as they walked out of the diner, the boys racing ahead toward the boat dock, Ford paused beside Emery under the shade of a moss-draped oak. "Thank you," he said. She folded her arms. "This doesn't mean anything yet." "I know." "They like you. That doesn't mean they trust you." "I know. And She stopped herself. The words tasted like smoke. "I don't trust easy anymore." He nodded once. "I'm not leaving. Whether it takes a week or a year, I'll be here." She looked at him. Really looked. "You say that now, but life's quieter here, Ford. There are no boardrooms to conquer, no headlines to chase." "Maybe that's the point," he said. "Maybe for once, quiet is what I want." She didn't reply, but her eyes lingered on his. The boys called from the dock, waving wildly. "Come look at the Pelican!" Ford jogged toward them, and Emery watched him go, heart pounding harder than it should have. The man who once vanished without a goodbye was starting to feel dangerously close to home again. Late afternoon light poured across Tybee Island like honey, stretching long shadows over the weathered porch of the beach cottage. Emery stood barefoot, her arms folded, a dish towel hanging from one hand, watching through the open screen door as Ledger and Kyson chased each other in the sand with shovels, their laughter high and untamed. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thoughts matter to me either way. Behind her, Rachel moved about the kitchen, scrubbing pans and not bothering to hide her opinion. "You let him take them to the dock. Alone." Emery turned just enough to see her. "He asked. They begged." Rachel dried her hands slowly. "You sure this is about them? Or are you just testing yourself?" Emery looked back out the door. Ford had returned with the boys half an hour ago, their pockets full of seashells and saltwater stories. She hadn't stopped thinking about the way Ledger had grabbed his hand on the walk back. No hesitation. No doubt. "I'm not testing anything," she said finally. I wanted to see if he'd actually show up." Rachel leaned against the counter. "He did, and you let him in. So now what?" Emery didn't answer. Instead, she reached for the kettle and poured 2 cups of chamomile, the only peace she allowed herself lately. Just as Rachel opened her mouth again, a knock sounded at the door. Emery froze. Kyson's voice followed. "It's him! Mommy, Ford's back!" Emery's pulse ticked faster. "Tell him I'll be out in a second." The screen door creaked open. Rachel gave her a long look as she passed. Just don't mistake presence for permanence. Emery stepped outside moments later, arms crossed again, her face careful. Ford was in a plain gray t-shirt, his usual crispness softened by the island's wind. He held a small box in one hand. "I brought something," he said. She arched a brow. "If it's an apology wrapped in chocolate, I'm not interested." He almost smiled. "Number it's for them." She took the box and opened it slowly. Inside were two hand-painted wooden nameplates, Ledger and Kyson, carved in weathered driftwood, smoothed and lacquered. "I asked a local artist this morning," Ford said. "Figured they might want to hang them on their bedroom door." Her fingers traced the curves of the letters. "You remembered their favorite colors. Ledger said blue like the sky. Kyson said green like gummy worms. I took notes." Emery looked up at him. "You're trying really hard." "I have to. I've missed too much not to." They stood there in silence, the breeze tugging at loose strands of her hair. Emery finally spoke, her voice lower. "I told them their dad was gone." Ford flinched slightly. "I didn't want to lie," she continued, "but I didn't want to fill them with false hope either. I didn't know if you'd ever show up, or if you did, who you'd even be." "I don't blame you," he said. She looked away. "They're already asking questions, Ford. Real ones. Kyson wants to know if you live in a castle. Ledger asked if you're rich enough to buy a spaceship." His smile flickered. "I can't afford the spaceship. Yet." Emery didn't laugh. "He also asked if I loved you," she added, her eyes locking with his. "And I couldn't answer." Ford's voice was soft. "I wouldn't expect you to. But they need answers and I don't have them. You showing up, it changes everything. And nothing." Ford took a step closer, not reaching for her, just standing in her space like someone who knew it wasn't his anymore, but couldn't help returning anyway. "I don't want to disrupt what you've built, Emery. I just want to earn a place in it." She studied him carefully, every piece of him. Not just the man she used to love, but the man in front of her now. Older, wearier, but finally present. "Why now?" she whispered. "What broke inside you that made you remember me?" He took a slow breath. "I was in Hong Kong 6 months ago, closing a merger. It should have felt like winning the Super Bowl. But I looked around that boardroom and realized I didn't know anyone's birthday. I didn't know anyone's favorite song. I had everything, but nothing that mattered." His voice cracked then, barely noticeable. "I saw your face in a crowd once. It wasn't you, but it stopped me in my tracks, and I thought, if I could just see you again, maybe I'd remember what it meant to feel something that wasn't tied to success." Emery blinked, caught off guard by the confession. "I came here for a break," he continued, "not to find you. But when I saw you at that wedding, and then the boys—" He didn't finish. Emery looked down at the nameplates in her hands. "You built a world without me," he said, softer now. "And it's beautiful. I just want to learn how to be part of it, even if it's just a piece." From inside the cottage, laughter erupted. Kyson had told another wild story. Ledger's voice followed, quieter but rich with amusement. "I need time," Emery said, her voice barely above the wind. "You can have all of it," he replied. She met his eyes again. "They deserve honesty and consistency. If you say you're staying, you stay, no matter what." He nodded. "I swear it." "And if they ask tomorrow who you are?" He held her gaze. "Then I'll tell them the truth. I'm a man who should have come back sooner." She didn't speak again, just turned slowly and opened the door. "Come in," she said quietly. And for the first time in 7 years, Ford Whitaker stepped into a home that could have been his, and still might be. The scent of cinnamon toast drifted through the cottage, warm and sticky like the Georgia morning sun filtering through linen curtains. Emery stood at the stove, flipping the last slice with a practiced hand. She wasn't used to cooking for four. Behind her, Ford sat at the dining table, helping Kyson cut his toast into stars while Ledger scribbled in a notebook. His brow furrowed, tongue slightly poking out as he focused. It was the kind of domestic quiet that didn't need to be earned. It just was. But Emery felt every beat of it. Ford's chair scraped softly as he leaned closer to Kyson. "You gonna save me one of those stars, buddy?" Kyson grinned. "Only if you give it a spaceship." Ledger glanced up. "We're building a whole galaxy. Want to help?" Ford hesitated just a moment too long. I'd like that." Emery set down a plate and slid into the chair across from them. Her eyes scanned the table. Crumbs, crayons, juice boxes. The kind of beautiful mess she'd protected for years. She reached for her coffee and took a sip, though it was already lukewarm. The moment held. Then the knock came. 3 quick raps at the door. Ford's head turned. Emery's breath caught. Rachel. Of course. Emery stood and crossed the room, her shoulders already tensing. Rachel stepped inside with a tote over her shoulder and raised eyebrows. Her gaze swept across the scene, Ford at the table, the boys in mid-giggle, Emery somewhere between leaning in and holding back. "Well," Rachel said slowly, "is this the breakfast club or—" Kyson ran up and hugged her. "Auntie Rachel, look, he made toast stars." Rachel bent down and kissed his cheek. "You bribed him with bread?" Ford gave a sheepish smile. It was effective. Emery cleared her throat. "Rachel, do you want coffee?" "I want the truth," Rachel said, not unkindly. She looked to Ford. "Can we talk? Outside?" Emery didn't stop him. Ford followed Rachel onto the porch, pulling the door closed gently behind him. They stood in the golden light, 2 people who had only known each other from stories, most of them unfinished. "I know who you are," Rachel began, arms folded, eyes sharp, "and I know what you did, or didn't do." Ford nodded slowly. "You should." Rachel took a breath. "I'm not Emery. I don't believe in almosts, or maybes, or sorry too lates. You don't get to show up and play house just because you missed a few birthdays and now you feel something." "I'm not playing anything," he said quietly. "And I didn't miss a few birthdays. I missed a childhood." Her eyes narrowed, but something in her softened. "Then why now?" "I thought I could come back when I was ready. But I was never ready. I had to lose everything that didn't matter to see what did." Rachel stared at him. "Do you love her?" Ford didn't hesitate. "Yes." "Are you planning to stay?" "Yes." "Even if it's messy? Even if she never forgives you the way you want her to?" Ford looked toward the ocean. "Even if I'm only ever allowed on the porch." Rachel let out a long breath. "She doesn't need another heartbreak. Neither do those boys. You want in, you're either all in, or you're out. For good." He met her eyes. "I'm in, all of it." She studied him, then gave a short nod. "Good." Inside, Emery stood by the sink, pretending to rinse plates while watching their silhouettes through the screen door. Kyson tugged on her sweater. "Is Auntie mad?" She glanced down. "No, sweetie. Just protective." Ledger joined him, standing solemn beside her. "He's really staying, huh?" She crouched and kissed his forehead. "He says he is." Ledger's voice was quieter now. "Are you going to let him be our dad?" Emery's throat tightened. "That's a big question. But it's a yes or no." She looked into his eyes, those same watchful, wise eyes she'd seen in the mirror every day for 7 years. "I don't know yet," she whispered. "But I'm trying." That evening, the sun dipped low behind the marsh. Emery stepped out to the porch after dinner, folding laundry on the railing. The boys were in the bath, arguing over rubber ducks. Ford walked up from the beach path, sand clinging to his jeans. He paused at the steps, not assuming, not pushing. "You have good kids," he said softly. Emery nodded. "They're strong. They're lucky." She looked at him. "They didn't feel lucky last Christmas when we couldn't afford lights." Ford's voice was rough. "You did all that alone." "I didn't want to," she admitted, folding a towel. "I begged the universe to send help. But you were too busy building empires." Silence passed between them. "I don't want to erase your hurt," he said. "I just want to hold it with you if you'll let me." Her hands stilled. "You really remember it?" she asked. "That I left you on a Thursday too?" He nodded. "I remember standing in the terminal and thinking, if I go now, I'll lose her. But you went anyway. I thought I had to. I thought love could wait. But it doesn't. Not when it's real." She turned, finally facing him. "You left. You disappeared. And now you're here with pancakes and toy name signs and all the right words. But love isn't earned through gestures, Ford. It's earned through consistency, through time." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm still standing here." She looked at him, eyes searching. Then, without a word, she stepped back inside, leaving the door open. And Ford followed her in. Not because he was forgiven, but because, for the first time, she didn't close the door behind her. The hum of conversation buzzed low inside the Drift-Tide Cafe, blending with the soft clatter of silverware and the occasional hiss from the espresso machine. Emery sat alone near the back window, tucked into a corner booth with her laptop open, but untouched. Her eyes weren't on the screen. They were fixed on the entrance. He was late. She wasn't sure why that bothered her more than it should have. Maybe because he hadn't been late to anything yet. Not to the diner, not to the boys' impromptu sandcastle contest, not to Kyson's bedtime story last night. She glanced at her phone. No messages. Just as she turned back toward the window, the bell above the door jingled. Ford stepped in, rain clinging to his sleeves, hair tousled, breath just slightly caught. "Sorry," he said, sliding into the booth across from her. Traffic near the marina. Someone's golden retriever caused a slow-motion parade. Emery let out a reluctant smile. Classic Tybee. He looked at her carefully, trying to read her mood. "You said you wanted to talk." She nodded and pushed a napkin dispenser aside like it was a barrier she no longer needed between them. "There's something coming," she said. "Something you need to be prepared for." Ford's shoulders squared subtly. "Okay." "There are whispers," she continued. "People here, they're small-town friendly, but they watch, and they talk, especially about newcomers who show up in kids' lives suddenly." His brows furrowed. "What kind of whispers?" Emery hesitated. "Someone posted a photo yesterday. You and Ledger walking back from the beach. It was on a local Facebook group. I didn't see it until this morning." Ford sat straighter. "What did it say?" "It didn't say anything obvious," she replied. "Just questions, speculation." Then more people started chiming in. A few remembered your face. One even mentioned your name. He exhaled slowly, pressing his palms together. This town was supposed to be a break. Quiet. "I know. What do you need from me?" Emery's gaze met his. "I need you to understand that if this spreads, it won't just be whispers. It'll be questions for Ledger and Kyson. Questions I've tried to shield them from their entire lives." Ford nodded. "I can issue a statement." "No." Her voice was firm. "Not yet. Not public. Not anything flashy. I don't want to hide, Emery. And I don't want them to be swallowed up by headlines they don't even understand." Ford leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Then what do you want?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. She slid it across the table. He didn't touch it. "What is it?" "A letter," she said. "I wrote it 2 years ago. To you. I never mailed it." He stared at the envelope, then slowly picked it up, unsealing it with careful fingers. As he read, the air shifted. Emery watched him closely. The letter was short. "Ford, I don't know if you'll ever read this, or if it will end up in a drawer with old receipts and keys you've forgotten what they open. But in case it reaches you, here's what I want you to know. I didn't need money or closure. I needed presence. I needed someone to sit with me during ultrasounds, to rub my back during contractions, to hold my hand when I heard 2 heartbeats and realized I was about to raise 2 people all by myself. And I needed someone to tell them, someday, that they were never a mistake, that they were wanted, that the man who left wasn't running from them. But you never came, and I still showed up, for them, every single day. That's what a parent is." Emery. When he finished reading, Ford folded the letter with trembling hands. He set it down on the table, then looked up at her, eyes glassy but steady. "I don't know how to fix that," he said quietly. "You can't," she replied. "It's not about fixing. It's about not leaving again when it gets uncomfortable." Ford reached across the table just barely, his fingers brushing the edge of the letter. "I want to tell them," he said. "Not yet." He frowned. "Why?" "Because they're still asking in circles. They're not ready for a straight line." Outside, rain began tapping against the window again, gentle and rhythmic, like a metronome for the tension between them. Emery took a sip of her lukewarm coffee. "Rachel's worried. She doesn't like me. She doesn't trust you. There's a difference." Ford nodded slowly. "I'll earn her trust." "It's not just hers," Emery added. "There's someone else you'll need to answer to." He tilted his head. "Who?" She hesitated. "My mother." Ford froze. "I didn't even know you still spoke," he said. "We don't. Not often. But she's coming to town tomorrow." He swallowed. "Because of me?" "Because of the boys. She's never really accepted that I chose to raise them alone. And now, with you here, I think she wants to see it with her own eyes." Ford leaned back, nodding once. "What should I expect?" Emery sighed. A polite smile, and questions that sound kind but feel like interrogations. He smiled faintly. "Sounds familiar." She almost laughed. They sat in silence for a few more minutes. Not the heavy kind. Just the kind where neither of them needed to speak to fill the air. As Ford stood to leave, he slid the letter back to her. "Keep it," she said, as a reminder. He looked at it once more, then tucked it into his jacket pocket, close to his chest. Outside, the rain had stopped, and somewhere in that soft post-storm light, the first real crack in the wall between them had begun to show. Not broken, but beginning. The next morning arrived with a golden stillness that made everything feel more fragile. Emery stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of her blouse for the 3rd time. Her reflection stared back, composed on the outside, but her stomach was doing tight, anxious circles. Behind her, the sound of Kyson humming drifted in from the living room. Ledger was quietly building something intricate with blocks, his tongue poking out as always when he focused. She could feel the clock ticking. The last time her mother had visited was nearly a year ago, and even then it had been a quick overnight drop-in, polite smiles, tight hugs, and a goodbye that lingered with more judgment than warmth. They loved each other, of course, but it was the kind of love that came with silent disapproval tucked inside every compliment. Now her mother was arriving into a house that had quietly changed. Ford was here, and that changed everything. At exactly 10:03, a gray sedan pulled up along the gravel edge of the cottage drive. Emery watched from the front window as Diane James stepped out in neatly pressed slacks, pearl earrings gleaming despite the overcast sky. Her stride was clipped. Purposeful. Rachel opened the door before Emery could. "Brace yourself," she murmured with a smirk. "The Queen has landed." Emery rolled her eyes and stepped forward. "Mom." Diane leaned in to kiss her cheek. "Emery, you look tired." Emery smiled tightly. "Nice to see you too. Where are my grandsons?" "Inside, playing." Diane stepped in, taking in the room like it was a museum. Her gaze landed on the boys and softened, just a bit. "There's my little hurricanes." Kyson ran over and hugged her legs. "Grandma!" Ledger followed, more reserved but smiling. "Hi." Diane crouched and kissed them both. "You've grown again. Stop that." Emery felt herself relax for half a second, until Diane's eyes flicked toward the hallway, where a new voice had just entered the mix. "I made coffee," Ford said, emerging from the kitchen with 2 mugs in hand. "I wasn't sure if you still take it black." Diane blinked. Emery's breath caught. "You must be Ford," Diane said evenly, accepting the mug but not the familiarity. "Yes, ma'am. You've been busy these past few days." Emery stepped in quickly. "He's been helping with the boys." "I'm sure he has." Diane took a sip of coffee and turned toward the living room. "Let's sit." The 4 of them settled into the mismatched furniture, Diane on the love seat, Ford and Emery on opposite ends of the couch. The boys played nearby, pretending not to listen, but Emery knew better. "So," Diane said, crossing one leg neatly over the other, "tell me, Ford, what brings you to Tybee?" Ford didn't blink. "A very overdue visit." "I imagine it is. 7 years, was it?" "Yes, ma'am." "And in those 7 years, did it ever occur to you to send a card, a letter, a phone call?" Ford nodded. "Every day. I just didn't have the courage to send them." "Interesting." Her voice didn't raise, but every syllable landed like a test. Emery closed her eyes for a moment. She had warned him. Her mother didn't yell. She dissected, gently, precisely. "I didn't come here expecting to be forgiven," Ford continued. "I came here to try, to learn who they are, who Emery's become, who I'm supposed to be now." Diane tilted her head. "And what exactly are you hoping to become?" "A father." Kyson looked up from his blocks. "He already is." The room fell still. Emery's heart stopped. Diane blinked. "Is that so?" Kyson nodded confidently. "He reads to us at night, and he made toast stars." Ford smiled faintly, eyes misted. Ledger added softly, "He knows how to fix our bike chain, too." Diane looked at Emery. "Well, they certainly seem to be forming opinions." Emery took a breath, finally speaking. "Mom, I know this is sudden, but Ford's been present. Thoughtful. He hasn't tried to claim anything, just be here." Diane's gaze was unreadable. "And you believe this will last?" Emery hesitated. "I don't know, but I know he's showing up, and for now that's more than I ever expected." Ford stood gently. "I'll give you both a moment." He walked toward the back porch, pausing only to squeeze Kyson's shoulder gently on the way out. When the screen door clicked shut, Diane sighed. "He's charming." Emery laughed softly. "He's different. You don't trust him." "I'm learning to." Diane's expression softened, the armor cracking just slightly. "I know I've been hard on you, Emery. I didn't raise you to do this alone. But you did. And you did it well." Emery's voice trembled. "I had to. I know, and I'm proud of you." They sat in silence for a moment, both staring at the open door that swayed with the wind. "Just protect them," Diane said finally, "and protect yourself." "I am," Emery whispered, "but maybe now I don't have to do it alone." Later that evening, when the sky had turned a sleepy lavender and the boys were tucked in, Emery stepped onto the porch. Ford sat on the swing, slow and steady. "She likes you more than she lets on," Emery said. "She called me interesting. I'll take it." They sat in silence, the breeze tugging at the edges of their sleeves. "She thinks I'll break your heart again," he said finally. "She's not alone." Ford turned toward her. "I want to promise you I won't. But I know promises are just air until they're tested." She looked at him, really looked. "Then stop making them. Just keep showing up." He nodded. "Every day." The porch light flickered on above them, casting a warm glow over two people still learning how to be whole again, with each other, with themselves. And somewhere in that quiet, Emery realized she wanted him to keep showing up. Not just for the boys, but for her too. The air was heavier that morning, thick with heat and something Emery couldn't name, something that hummed just beneath the surface, like a string pulled too tight. She felt it before she opened her eyes, before the coffee had brewed, before Kyson had even come padding down the hall, sleepy-eyed and asking for his favorite cereal. By the time she stepped onto the porch with her mug, the sky was already clouding over. A storm, maybe, or something else. Ford was at the edge of the walkway, phone pressed to his ear, pacing in short, tight lines. His jaw was tense, his shoulders higher than usual. His back was turned, but she caught fragments of his voice, controlled but strained. "No, I told them this is not the time. No, Leandro, I'm not flying back in early." Silence, then sharper. "Because I have a life here now." Emery stepped back inside before he noticed her, heart tapping against her ribs. The words echoed louder than she wanted to admit. She has a life here now. Rachel looked up from the table, one eyebrow lifted. "He's still here?" Emery gave a half nod. "He's not just visiting. Not anymore." "Right," Rachel muttered. "Until his next merger needs closing." "Rach." "I'm just saying," her sister added, softer now. "Don't let comfort start to look like commitment. They're not the same." Emery didn't respond. She was too busy listening to the silence that followed Ford's call. By noon the clouds broke open. Rain poured in thick sheets, clinging to the windows, muting the colors of the world. The boys built a blanket fort in the living room, while Ford quietly fixed a loose cabinet hinge in the kitchen. He didn't say much. Neither did Emery. But the quiet between them wasn't cold. It was waiting. Later that afternoon she stepped out to run a quick errand, groceries, sunscreen, more markers, and left Ford in charge of the boys. It was supposed to be quick. But when she turned the corner of Market Street, she saw the display through the bakery window. It wasn't the sweets that made her stop. It was the woman, tall, elegant, platinum blonde waves cascading down her back, a tailored cream suit that didn't belong to island life. Her voice carried just loud enough to command attention, even through glass. And then she laughed and placed her hand, familiar, too familiar, on Ford's arm. Emery froze. Ford didn't pull away. Her breath caught in her throat. The stranger leaned in again, too close, her eyes bright with something that made Emery's stomach knot. Ford said something back. The woman's smile widened. Emery turned and walked out of view before she could see more. She didn't need to. 15 minutes later she returned home, paper bag in hand, the rain gone but the sky still gray. Ford looked up from the floor, where he was helping Kyson build a paper rocket. "Hey, everything okay?" Emery placed the bag on the counter, not answering right away. He stood. "Emery?" She didn't look at him. "Who was she?" His face changed, slowly, carefully. "Vanessa," he said. Emery's mouth pulled into a hard line. "Of course. She came to the island for a meeting. She didn't know I was here." And you just happened to run into each other at a bakery. She saw me through the window. I didn't plan it. Did she touch your arm? Ford's silence was answer enough. Emery exhaled, sharp and shaky. You've been here for what, a couple weeks, and she's already flying in? She didn't fly in for me. But she found you. Fast. He took a step toward her. Emery, nothing happened. Nothing had to. Her voice broke just slightly. Do you have any idea what it felt like to see you standing there, smiling like nothing's changed, while she looked at you like she still owned you? I don't belong to her. But you did. And part of you might still. Ford's hands dropped to his sides. That's not fair. No, Ford. What's not fair is me watching my sons build a connection with someone who still has a foot in two worlds. The boys were quiet now, watching from the other room. Their rocket paused mid-assembly. Ford turned, glanced at them, then back at Emery. I'll talk to her, he said. She's still here? I told her to leave, but I'll make it clear. Emery's eyes glistened with anger and something deeper. Fear, maybe. Hurt. Make it clear to who, Ford? To her or to yourself? He didn't answer. She stepped back, wiping her hands on a towel she didn't need. This is exactly what I meant when I said you can't just show up and expect to fit. I don't expect anything, he said, but I'm not leaving either. I never asked you to. Their eyes locked. For a long moment there was only the sound of a distant seagull and the slow dripping of rain from the gutters. Then Ledger spoke, soft and unsure, from behind the couch. Mommy, did we do something wrong? Emery's chest caved inward. She crossed the room, knelt beside him, and pulled both boys into her arms. No, baby, not you, never you. Ford stood at a distance, frozen by the weight of his presence. How close he was to being part of something, and how quickly that line could shift beneath his feet. Later that night, Emery stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself. Ford walked up behind her, his voice just above a whisper. I'll fix this. She didn't turn around. You can't fix what still feels broken, she said. Then, without another word, she walked away, leaving him standing there, alone again. But not because she wanted him gone, because she wanted him to stay, and didn't know how to trust that he would. The following morning arrived with silence, the kind that settled heavy in the walls, in the floors, in the pauses between footsteps. Emery moved through the cottage on autopilot, folding laundry that didn't need folding, reorganizing a spice drawer she rarely used. Every motion was a distraction, every breath a question she didn't know how to ask. Ford hadn't left, but he hadn't spoken to her since the night before. He'd taken the pull-out in the sunroom, giving her space, respecting the boundary she didn't have the strength to define. When she passed the room earlier, she found the sheets neatly folded. The space cleared, like he was preparing for an exit he hoped wouldn't come. Mommy Kyson's tired, Ledger said, tugging gently at her sleeve. Emery turned, brow furrowing as she crouched beside her son. Tired? Ledger nodded. He didn't want breakfast. He said his belly feels floaty. Alarm sparked behind her eyes. Emery rose and walked quickly to the boys' room, finding Kyson curled beneath a blanket, pale and limp, his favorite stuffed turtle pressed to his chest. Hey, baby, she whispered, sitting beside him. Does your head hurt? He nodded slowly. Stomach? Another nod. Emery pressed her hand to his forehead, warm. Too warm. She stood, calm but urgent. Ford? He appeared in the hallway instantly. What is it? It's Kyson. He's burning up. Without hesitation, Ford stepped into the room, his whole posture shifting, focus replacing fear. He crouched next to Kyson, gently brushing the hair back from his damp forehead. We need to get him checked, Emery said. Urgent care's 20 minutes. I'll drive, he said, already grabbing his keys. You stay with Ledger. She hesitated. Are you sure? Ford met her gaze. Trust me. Please. The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of waiting. Emery sat on the porch swing with Ledger in her lap, the boy's arms wrapped around her waist like he was trying to hold her heart steady. She didn't realize she was crying until Ledger looked up and said, Mommy, it's okay to be scared. It nearly broke her. She pulled him tighter and whispered, I'm not scared. I'm just waiting. The call came 40 minutes later. Ford's voice was calm but gentle. Mild viral infection. They gave him fluids, something for the fever. He's already asking for a popsicle. Emery laughed through tears. Thank God. I'll bring him home in an hour. She exhaled, the tightness in her chest finally beginning to loosen. Thank you. You don't need to thank me, he said. He's my son, too. The words lingered long after the call ended. When the door finally opened just after noon, Kyson was wrapped in a blanket, cheeks flushed, but eyes brighter. Ford carried him with a quiet tenderness that Emery hadn't seen before. Not just a man holding a child, but a father carrying something sacred. Ledger ran to them instantly, fussing and offering his favorite comic book. Ford smiled. He's okay, buddy. Just needs rest. Emery hovered, unsure, until Kyson reached for her. I missed you, Mommy. She kissed his forehead. I missed you too, baby. After settling Kyson on the couch, she walked into the kitchen, finding Ford rinsing out a water bottle at the sink. I wasn't sure you'd take him, she said softly. I wasn't going to ask for permission to care about him, he replied without looking at her. I knew you'd go. But when you didn't, I saw it in your face. You needed someone else to step in. Her throat tightened. He dried his hands slowly, then turned. That's what I'm here for, Emery. Not to prove I can fix things, but to stand in the gap when you can't do it alone. She stared at him, caught off guard by how steady he sounded, how sure, and how badly she wanted to believe him. Vanessa left the island, he added. Last night, I told her it was done. Completely. Emery swallowed. Why didn't you tell me? Because I knew it wouldn't change anything until you were ready to believe it. I wanted to give you the space to come to that on your own. Her eyes fell to the floor. I wanted to run when I saw her. I know. But I didn't. He took a tentative step forward. And now? She looked up at him, eyes brimming. I don't want to run. But I don't know how to stay either. Ford nodded, taking another step. Then let's start small. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a photo. Faded edges. A Polaroid from years ago. Her, smiling at the beach, hair in the wind. He handed it to her like it was something precious. I kept this. Every city, every hotel, every deal. This is what home looked like to me, even when I didn't have one. She held it, fingers trembling slightly. I didn't need it back then, she said, because I had the real thing. I had you. I know, he whispered, and I left. But you came back, she said, and today, you stayed. They stood in the kitchen, the light from the window catching the edge of the photo, dust dancing in the air between them. I don't know what happens next, Emery said. Me neither, Ford replied. But I'm here to find out. With you. She took a breath. Then finally, slowly she nodded. And outside, the storm passed for good. The morning sun poured through the window like warm promise, soft and golden, catching dust motes mid-air. Emery stood at the sink, rinsing breakfast plates, her sleeves rolled up, her expression unreadable. She hadn't said much since the night before, not because she was upset, but because the silence felt gentler than words. Ford sat at the dining table, his coffee untouched. He watched Ledger draw on a napkin with a blue crayon, quiet and focused. Kyson sat beside him, still a little sluggish but better, color in his cheeks, his small hand resting comfortably on Ford's arm like it had always belonged there. It was a simple morning. Too simple, maybe, because inside Ford's chest, something had shifted. The picture Emery held in her hands the night before, the moment she said, "Today, you stayed." It stayed with him long after she went to bed. Now he couldn't shake what he knew he had to do next. "Can I talk to you?" he asked, standing up. Emery turned from the sink. "Now?" He nodded. "Just us." Rachel, reading in the corner, looked up and raised a brow. "I'll take the boys for a walk," she said casually, though her eyes lingered on Emery with a silent question. Emery dried her hands, watching as Ledger and Kyson followed their aunt out the door, rain boots slapping against the floor, laughter trailing behind them. Ford waited until the door closed before speaking. "I have something to tell you," he said, voice lower than usual, "but I don't want you to hear it from someone else." Emery leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Okay." He took a breath. "My company, Eastbridge Tech, we've been negotiating a public merge. It's been quiet, confidential. But last night, Leandro called. It leaked." Emery blinked. "Leaked? What does that mean?" "It means the press is circling. They already linked me to Tybee. And with pictures of the boys floating around from that Facebook group." Her face paled. "They're going to start asking questions. About you, about them, about us." She stared at him, trying to absorb the words. "But why would they care?" "Because I've been labeled as the untouchable executive for years. No attachments, no family. This—" He gestured vaguely toward the house, the table, the photo still taped to the fridge. "This changes the narrative. And narratives sell." He nodded. She turned away, pacing once. "So what do we do? Hide? Pretend you're not here?" "No." His voice was firmer now. "We get ahead of it." Her head snapped around. "How?" "I make a statement, to the press, on my terms. I tell them the truth." Emery's voice trembled. "What truth?" "That I walked away from the most important part of my life. And now I'm back, not to fix it, but to honor it. That I have 2 sons, Ledger and Kyson. That their mother is the strongest woman I've ever known. That this isn't a scandal, it's a second chance." Silence wrapped the room. Emery slowly sank into a chair. "Do you know what that kind of attention would do to the boys? To me?" "I do. That's why I'm not just telling the truth," he said, voice softer now. "I'm walking away." She looked up sharply. "From what?" "From Eastbridge." The words hit like thunder. "What?" she whispered. "I'm stepping down, effective immediately." "Ford, that company is your life." "It was, but it cost me mine. It cost me you, them, everything that matters." She blinked, stunned. "You said it yourself," he added gently. "Love isn't earned through gestures. It's earned through consistency, through time. I can't give you time if I'm flying to Hong Kong every month, stuck in conference rooms convincing strangers I'm the smartest man in the building." Emery stared at him, her voice cracking. "And you think resigning fixes that?" "No," he said, "but it makes space for me to build something else, something that starts with breakfast, and school pickups, and bedtime stories." She stood slowly, shaking her head. "You'd really walk away from everything you built for us?" "I'm not walking away from something," he said. "I'm walking towards someone." Tears welled in her eyes, slow and certain. "I was prepared for you to leave," she said. "I even rehearsed it. In my head I planned what I'd say to the boys, how I'd make them feel safe." Ford stepped forward, close but not touching her. "What did you plan to say?" "That some people aren't meant to stay." that sometimes love isn't enough. He let that sit, then asked gently, "What would you say now?" Emery looked at him, eyes glassy but fierce. That sometimes love needs time, but when it finally arrives, it stays. He reached out, cupping her cheek, thumb brushing the edge of her tears. "Then let me stay." She nodded. Not a dramatic nod, not movie-worthy, just enough. That evening, as the sun melted into the sea and the boys snuggled under quilts in the living room, Emery watched Ford step onto the porch with his phone. She heard him say it, clearly, calmly. "To the board, I'm resigning. Effective tonight. And yes, I'm sure." And when he stepped back inside, he wasn't the CEO of a global tech firm, he was just Ford, the man who came home. It had been 4 days since Ford stepped down, 4 days since he let go of everything that once defined him and picked up something softer, something slower, but infinitely more real. Emery wasn't sure what she expected when she woke that next morning and realized he wasn't flying off to a board meeting or buried in emails before breakfast. She found him in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, burning the toast but still smiling like it mattered. And somehow it did. By the end of the week, Ledger was dragging him to the local hardware store for a rocket launcher blueprint. Kyson was assigning him bedtime voices for each story character. And Emery. Emery was learning how to let him exist in the quiet spaces of her world, the ones she used to fill with caution. But it wasn't perfect, because letting someone back in never is. "I can help," Ford said, standing at the counter as Emery boxed up cupcakes for her weekend market booth. She slid a tray into the cardboard container. "You already helped with the labels." "Yeah, but I didn't get to lick the spoon. That's half the joy." She smiled without looking at him. "You've got a frosting smear on your cheek." "Where?" She gestured vaguely. "Left side." He wiped the wrong one. She laughed, one of those low, involuntary laughs that slipped through before she could stop it. Ford stilled. "That's the first time you've laughed around me like that." Emery paused, her hand still on the pastry box. "Like what?" "Like you forgot I hurt you." She looked up slowly. "I haven't forgotten. I know. But I am learning how to let the joy back in." That sentence hung between them, weighty and fragile. He nodded quietly. "I'll keep earning every piece of it." Later that afternoon, Ford joined the boys in the backyard, where the old magnolia tree cast broad shadows over their hand-dug dinosaur dig site. Emery watched from the porch as Kyson handed him a plastic trowel. "You're the assistant. I'm the scientist." Ford bowed his head seriously. "Understood, sir." Ledger looked up at Emery and whispered, "Mommy, does he live here now?" The question knocked the air from her lungs. She knelt beside him. "Would you like it if he did?" Ledger shrugged, then nodded. "Yeah, he doesn't rush, and he listens." Emery's throat tightened. That evening, after the boys were tucked in and Rachel had gone home with leftover brownies and a smug smile, Emery and Ford sat on the porch swing, wrapped in a fleece throw as the ocean whispered in the distance. He reached into the pocket of his hoodie and pulled out a folded paper. "What's that?" she asked. "Something Ledger gave me." She raised an eyebrow. Ford handed it over. It was a drawing, childlike but full of heart, stick figures labeled Mommy, Ledger, Kyson, and Ford. At the bottom in crayon-scrawled letters it read, "Our family." Not finished yet. Emery stared at it, quiet. Ford watched her. "I didn't know what to do with that, so I figured I'd show it to you first." She smoothed the paper with trembling fingers. "He sees it," she whispered, "before I even do." "He feels it," Ford said, "because kids know when love is real, even when it's slow." Emery looked at him, something in her chest aching open. "What do we do with this?" He reached out gently, taking her hand. We grow it, one day at a time. She nodded, eyes shimmering, but then the porch light flickered, twice. Ford looked toward the house. That's the third time today. It's old wiring, Emery said. It always acts up when it rains. Ford stood. Let me take a look. She smiled. You're not an electrician. No, but I've watched at least 3 DIY videos this week. I'm basically certified. He disappeared inside. Emery stayed on the swing, staring at the drawing. Not finished yet. Neither were they. A few minutes later, Ford returned, holding a screwdriver and a mischievous grin. Fixed it, for now. You're handy all of a sudden? I'm evolving, he said, sitting beside her again. You know, post-corporate enlightenment. She shook her head, biting back a smile. So what comes next in your great evolution? He looked at her. Really looked. Making this permanent. Her heart skipped. You mean, not just being here, he said. Belonging here. Officially. With you. With them. Emery swallowed hard. I'm not proposing, he added quickly. Yet. But I'm telling you that I want a life that includes burnt toast, crayon art, porch swings, and you. She leaned into him slowly, resting her head on his shoulder. And what if I'm still scared? She asked. Then we'll be scared together. But we won't stop showing up. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, she let herself rest fully into someone else's promise. Not because he said it loud, but because he said it slowly, and never left. The rain came back that night, steady and soft like a lullaby no one asked for, but everyone needed. Emery sat on the front porch swing alone, a knit blanket around her shoulders, a cup of tea in her hands going cold. The porch light flickered once, then steadied, casting a warm halo over the steps. The only sound was the tapping of drops on the wooden rail and the hush of the ocean in the distance, whispering secrets it never kept. Ford hadn't come out yet. He was inside with the boys, reading the last chapter of a space adventure they'd started together a week ago. Ledger insisted on voices. Kyson insisted on sound effects. Ford gave them both, even though his rocket ship voice sounded suspiciously like an overconfident cowboy. Emery smiled faintly at the thought. This life, it was becoming real, predictable in a way she'd never trusted before. And that's what scared her most. The door creaked open behind her, and Ford stepped onto the porch, barefoot, holding 2 mugs. You forgot to drink this, he said, offering her the new cup. She swapped him and took it silently. They're asleep, he said, settling beside her. Ledger tried to hide the flashlight again. Emery chuckled. He's stubborn. He gets that from his mom. She raised an eyebrow. Excuse you. Ford bumped her shoulder gently with his. He's also smart, sensitive, and fiercely loyal. And that's you? No, he said, smiling. That's you too. They sat in silence for a moment, the kind that no longer felt like waiting, but like arriving. Finally, Ford leaned back, gazing up at the dark sky above them. You said something a while ago, about trust, about how it doesn't come from gestures, but from showing up. Emery nodded slowly. And you've been doing that. I have, he agreed, but there's something I haven't done yet, and I think it's time. He reached into the pocket of his flannel shirt and pulled out a folded, time-worn letter. It looked like it had been opened and refolded 100 times. Emery frowned. What is that? It's the letter I wrote to you after I left. Her breath caught. You wrote me a letter? He nodded. I never sent it. I carried it with me city to city. Told myself I'd mail it. Then I told myself it was too late. Then I convinced myself you didn't want to read it anymore. Emery stared at the paper in his hand. I need to read it to you, he said. Not for closure. For truth, she didn't stop him. Ford unfolded it carefully, the corners soft from years of hesitation. His voice was steady but low. Emery, you probably hate me, and you have every right to. I left not because I didn't love you, but because I didn't know how to hold love and fear at the same time. And I was afraid. Of fatherhood, of failing, of being needed in a way that no amount of money could fix. I thought success would make me worthy of staying. But all it did was teach me how lonely achievement feels without someone to come home to. I don't know what kind of man I'll become. But I know this, you are the beginning of every good thing I've ever had. And if this is goodbye, I'll carry you with me anyway. Ford. Emery didn't speak. The rain did. The porch. The quiet. Then her voice, softer than it had ever been. I thought about writing you back, 1,000 times. He looked at her. Why didn't you? Because the words changed every time. First I was angry, then number, then too tired to be either. She turned toward him, her eyes filled with something too deep for just sadness. And then the boys started asking questions, and I didn't know whether to tell them the truth or protect them from it. Ford's eyes shone with tears he didn't bother hiding. And what did you decide? I decided to tell them what I wished had been true, that their father was out there somewhere thinking about them, that he hadn't forgotten. His voice cracked. That was generous. No, she whispered. That was love. Silence again. Then Ford reached for her hand, not grasping, just resting his fingers beside hers. She let them stay. You've changed, she said. I had to. But not all of you, she added. You still over-explain things. You still organize your cereal boxes by fiber content. He smiled, sheepish. And you still look at me, she said, her voice faltering, like I'm the only thing you've ever wanted. Because you are. She inhaled slowly. Do you know how hard it is to love someone again who once left you behind? He nodded. Yes. And do you know how hard it is to admit that you still do? His brows lifted. You still do? Tears touched her lashes. I never stopped. I just buried it. Deep. Ford's throat worked. Can I say something without ruining this moment? She laughed softly. You just read a 7-year-old breakup letter. Go ahead. I'm still not proposing. Not yet. But I'm going to build you a porch swing that doesn't squeak. And I'm going to show up every time you think I won't. And one day when you're ready, I'm going to ask the boys if I can marry their mom. Emery let the tears fall. Not from pain, but from finally being seen, held, and hoped for. She turned toward him, tucked herself against his shoulder, and whispered through a smile, They'll say yes. And above them, the porch light flickered one last time, then stayed on. The backyard had never looked like this. Strings of soft white lights hung from the magnolia tree, swaying gently in the breeze like fireflies caught mid-dream. Mason jars filled with fresh-cut hydrangeas lined the wooden table that Ford and the boys had sanded down together earlier that week. Emery stood at the kitchen sink, watching it all come together through the open window, her hands still damp from rinsing the last tray of lemonade glasses. She didn't ask for any of it. And yet, she hadn't said no. Rachel's voice floated in from the back door. If this is your version of casual, remind me never to let you plan my birthday. Ford leaned in from outside, carrying a tray of finger sandwiches with the boys trailing behind him, dressed in matching button-downs, one slightly wrinkled, the other with a crooked bow tie and a whole lot of confidence. Ledger spotted Emery through the window and grinned. Mommy, is this a wedding? Kyson popped up beside him. It's a surprise. Ford gave a soft laugh. It's not a wedding, not yet. Emery raised an eyebrow, wiping her hands on a towel. Then what is it? Rachel appeared at her side, a knowing smile tugging at her lips. It's a thank you. A not-so-subtle, heart-melting, handcrafted thank you. A thank you for what? For letting him stay, Rachel said gently. For building something new. Emery stepped outside, the scent of fresh lavender and lemon bread catching on the air. She walked slowly across the yard, feet bare in the grass, heart thudding louder with each step. Ford turned when he saw her, and for a second, just one, his expression dropped every ounce of effort, charm, and practiced calm. What was left was something unguarded, reverent. "You did all this?" she asked. He nodded, with a lot of supervision. Kyson tugged on her hand. "We helped with the lights, and Daddy picked your flowers." She froze. Daddy. It had slipped out of his mouth like it had always been there. Ford didn't move, didn't react. But Emery saw it, the way his fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the table, how his throat bobbed. She crouched beside Kyson and gently brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "You called him Daddy." Kyson shrugged. "He's here. He stays. That's what daddies do, right?" Her chest tightened and tears pricked her eyes so fast she didn't have time to hide them. Ford knelt down beside them. "Only if it's okay with you." Emery didn't say a word. She couldn't. But she nodded, and in that nod there was more than permission. There was forgiveness. There was beginning. Later, after the sandwiches were eaten and the boys had collapsed in a giggling heap on a blanket under the tree, Rachel turned up soft music on her phone and retreated inside with a wink. Ford reached for Emery's hand. "May I have this dance?" She laughed. "There's no one else here." "I wasn't asking anyone else." She placed her hand in his and let him guide her into a slow sway beneath the lights. The air smelled like rain from 2 days ago, still fresh in the soil, sweetened now by garden blooms and the warmth of something she hadn't dared name until now. Home. "I've been thinking," Ford said, voice low against the shell of her ear, "about how many chances we get in this life." "Not many," Emery whispered back. "No," he agreed, "but sometimes, if you're really lucky, you get just one more, the one that counts." They moved in silence for a while, the boys' laughter becoming sleepy mumbles from across the yard, their limbs tangled in fleece blankets and bedtime stories told earlier than usual. Ford stopped moving, but he didn't let go of her hand. "I want them to remember this night," he said. "They will," Emery replied. "No, I mean, I want them to remember it as the night everything started." She looked up at him, her brows knit in quiet confusion. Ford slowly dropped to one knee. Not with a box, not with a plan, just with his heart wide open. "I know I said I'd wait, that I wouldn't rush this. But Emery," his voice faltered, full of everything he used to keep guarded, "I've already spent 7 years without you. I'm not asking to skip the hard parts. I'm asking to walk through all of it, by your side, with Ledger and Kyson. As a family." Her hand trembled as she touched his face. "You're really asking me?" He nodded, eyes full, voice steady. "I'm not promising perfection. I'm promising presence, every morning, every night, every messy middle." Emery dropped to her knees too, hands framing his face. "I don't need a ring tonight," she whispered. "I just need to know you'll still be here tomorrow." "I will." "Then yes," she said, tears spilling over. "Yes, to every beginning we didn't get the first time." Behind them, Ledger stirred and sat up, blinking into the light. "Mommy?" She turned, still kneeling in the grass. "Yeah, baby?" "Did he ask you yet?" Emery laughed through her tears. "He did." "Did you say yes?" She looked back at Ford, then at their sons, and with everything in her heart, she said it again. "Yes." The ceremony was simple. No aisle runners, no guest list, no drama. Just the breeze, the ocean, and the people who mattered most. They stood barefoot in the sand at golden hour, the tide brushing close enough to be part of it all, Ledger held the tiny woven basket of rings like it was made of glass, and Kyson kept glancing at his brother to make sure he hadn't lost his. Emery stood in a dress she'd picked that morning, a soft ivory wrap that moved with the wind like it already belonged there. Ford had never looked more at ease. No tie, no pressure, just a man grounded in exactly where he was supposed to be. Rachel stood beside Emery, misty-eyed and pretending not to be. Diane sat just behind the boys with a quiet smile, her pearl earrings catching the sunlight like a nod to the old life Emery had outgrown and the new one she'd finally stepped into. The officiant was a retired schoolteacher from town, someone Emery had once shared a Tuesday morning coffee with while Ledger was in pre-K. Her voice was warm and steady, but Ford barely heard a word. He was looking at Emery, at the woman who had once built a life out of nothing and still managed to leave room in it for him. When it was time to speak, he didn't look down, didn't need notes. "I didn't come back to win you over," he said quietly. "I came back because my soul already lived here, with you, with Ledger and Kyson. I didn't come to be the man I thought I should have been. I came to be the man you already deserved." The wind caught his last word, carried it like a promise. Emery's voice trembled when she spoke. "I thought love had to be loud to be real, but what you've given me is quiet, steady. It showed up when I stopped waiting, and stayed when I didn't know how to ask it to. You weren't the ending I expected, Ford. You're the beginning I almost missed." Kyson sniffled, loudly, and said, "Can we do the ring part now?" Everyone laughed, soft and full. The boys handed them over, small hands slightly trembling with the weight of something they didn't fully understand, but fully believed in. They didn't need a kiss to make it official. The moment they looked at each other, it already was. That night, as the cottage lights glowed behind them and the boys fell asleep wrapped in one blanket on the porch swing, Emery and Ford stood barefoot in the sand again. She leaned into his side, his arm wrapping around her as if that was always the shape they were meant to be. "It's Thursday," he said. She smiled. "I know. You left me on a Thursday. And now," she whispered, "I'm marrying you on one." He kissed her temple, slow and sure. Behind them, the porch light didn't flicker anymore. Ledger mumbled something in his sleep. Kyson rolled closer to him and sighed. Emery closed her eyes, listening to the tide. "Do you remember," she asked softly, "when Kyson said he didn't have a dad like the other kids?" "I do." She looked up at him, voice thick with everything she never thought she'd have the courage to say. "Now he does." Ford didn't reply. He just held her tighter, and the waves whispered, "Yes." If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thoughts matter to me either way.